In the wake of North Korea's latest ICBM launch, the South Korean government has added 8 more North Koreans to the sanctions list, including the regime's intelligence bureau chief. The number of babies born hit a fresh low, dropping below the 20,000 threshold in October, accelerating chronic population concerns in South Korea. The Israel-Hamas war fuels worries over an escalation into wider regional conflict amid Houthis continuing attacks in the Red Sea and the U.S. striking against Iran-backed forces in Iraq. It's December 27, 2023. This is News Center. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Min. We begin with the South Korean government unveiling a fresh round of sanctions on North Korea in the wake of Pyongyang's recent ICBM launch. The sanctions list included 8 North Koreans, including the regime's spy agency chief, for their involvement in illicit weapons trade and cyber activities. Our defense correspondent Choi Min-jung reports.
South Korea has slapped a fresh round of sanctions on North Korea in response to the regime's most recent launch of an intercontinental ballistic missile on December 18th. Seoul's foreign ministry announced Wednesday that it has targeted 8 individuals. All 8 were reportedly involved in generating profits for the North Korean regime and financing nuclear weapons and missile programs through illegal cyber activities and trading sanctioned materials, including weapons. Among those on the list is Lee Chang-ho, the head of the regime's Reconnaissance General Bureau, also known as the organization behind North Korean hacking groups such as Kim Suk-ki, Lazarus, and Andariel. Lee is accused of gaining foreign currency and stealing technology through illicit cyber activities. Park Young-han was also sanctioned for trading weapons-related goods on behalf of Korea Mining and Development Trading Corporation, North Korea's primary arms dealer. North Korean diplomat Yoon reportedly traded lithium-6, a UN-prohibited nuclear-related item. The remaining listed individuals are affiliated with Pan Systems Pyongyang, an organization sanctioned by the South Korean government in 2016 and were involved in trading North Korean-made weapons. South Korea's foreign ministry also warned that Pyongyang's provocations would come with a price. It vowed to cooperate more closely with the international community, including the U.S. and Japan, to ensure that the regime realizes that it must stop its provocations and engage in denuclearization talks. With the sanctions now in place, those wishing to engage in financial transactions with these individuals must obtain permission from the governor of the Bank of Korea or the Financial Services Commission. The latest measures are the 14th round of sanctions to be put in place against Pyongyang since the beginning of the Yoon administration. Since October last year, South Korea has targeted 83 individuals and 53 institutions. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
The economic activities and living environment of North Korean defectors here in South Korea have improved. That's according to a report unveiled by Korea Hana Foundation showing the employment rate of North Korean defectors this year stood at more than 60%. This is up more than 1 percentage point compared to last year and is the highest figure since the records were first compiled in 2011. Also, in a survey of overall satisfaction levels of living in South Korea, nearly 80% of the participants said they are satisfied, the highest rate ever. President Yoon Suk-yeol made new vice ministerial appointments on Wednesday, continuing the wave of personnel changes in his administration ahead of the April general election. Career bureaucrat Kim Yoon-sung was named second vice minister for economy and finance, known for his extensive experience in fiscal and budgetary policies. For the transport ministry, Jin Hyun-hwan was appointed as first vice minister to stabilize housing supply and welfare, given his experience in real estate policies. Meanwhile, Song Myung-dal, considered an all-around expert on maritime policy, marine logistics and fisheries, was named the Vice Minister for Oceans and Fisheries. Shin Young-suk, former head of the National Human Resources Development Institute, became Vice Minister for Gender Equality and Family. This comes amid continued uncertainty over the future of the Gender Ministry, which the president pledged to abolish during his electoral campaign. Yoon also named a new secretariat for the Prime Minister and the head of the Public Procurement Service. Over in the Middle East, the continued attacks on Red Sea ships by Houthi militias and the U.S. strikes in Iraq are part of the latest development that's renewing concerns of a wider regional conflict. Lee Sun-kyun tells us more.
Fears over the Israel-Hamas war escalating into a wider Middle East conflict are growing amid Houthi attacks and U.S. strikes. The Iran-backed Houthi rebel group, which controls a large part of Yemen, said on Tuesday local time that it launched missiles at an MSC United vessel in the Red Sea after the crew ignored 3 warning calls. Houthis has been attacking Red Sea ships since the start of the Israel-Hamas war on October 7 to both pressure Israel to end its war against Gaza and to prevent humanitarian aid from entering the Strip. In response, the Pentagon assembled an international naval coalition called Operation Prosperity Guardian to protect these ships. U.S. military forces also launched multiple airstrikes at 3 locations within facilities in Iraq used by the Iranian-sponsored militia Kataib Hezbollah on Christmas night, in response to the drone attacks being carried out against U.S. personnel that left 3 of its service members injured. Meanwhile, the Israeli military says it's now preparing to shift its war operations from high-intensity fighting in Gaza to a low-intensity, long-term military action. The move comes as Washington has been calling on Israel to ease up on its heavy bombardment of Gaza and focus its attacks on Hamas infrastructure to limit civilian casualties. Israel Defense Forces Chief Herzi Halazi said Tuesday that its military is expanding its fighting in southern and central Gaza, adding that it is close to dismantling all Hamas battalions in northern regions. He said many Hamas soldiers and commanders have surrendered, with hundreds being held prisoner. However, he warned that the fight will last for many more months, saying there can be no shortcuts taken when dismantling an entire organization.
This war has necessary and not easy goals to achieve. It takes place in complex territory. Therefore, the war will go on for many months, and we will employ different methods to maintain our achievements for a long time.
But the World Food Programme warns that the humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip is worsening and that the region has now entered the so-called food crisis stage as the armed conflict in Gaza nears a 3-month mark. Lee Sun-kyun, Arirang News.
2023 has been a year of conflict in many parts of the world, with a new war breaking out in the Middle East and the war in Ukraine entering its 3rd year. Hundreds of thousands of civilians have been killed or injured, and the world is now left with a greater threat to global peace. For more, we have our foreign affairs correspondent Pei Eun-ji in the studio to take a closer look at how these wars have changed the geopolitical landscape. Welcome, Eun-ji.
Thanks for having me.
First, let's start with the conflict between Israel and Hamas. It's already been almost 3 months since the recent flare-up began in October. What kind of impact does this have on the Korean Peninsula?
Well, the Hamas militant group launched an unprecedented surprise attack in Israel on October 7th, which stunned the country and killed hundreds of people. Now, this is a war that's happening thousands of miles away, but it could still affect the security situation on the Korean Peninsula. An expert says the conflict could pose a risk to South Korea, as much of Washington's focus is centered on the Middle East rather than North Korean threats.
Already, the North Korean issue for the Biden administration and United States as a whole is not top priority at all. But because of this Israel-Hamas war, the North Korean issue is getting lower in the list of the foreign policy. So it makes some kind of negative effect to the Korean Peninsula.
He added that at the same time, North Korea is using this chance to be more critical of the U.S. for supporting Israel. And it appears that the North is supporting Hamas. The Israeli military said about 10% of the weapons used by Hamas during its attack on Israel on October 7th were manufactured in North Korea. These security risks are especially concerning as they come at a time when the North has conducted 5 ICBM launches this year, the highest number in a single year.
Moving on to the situation in Ukraine, it's been almost 2 years since Russia's invasion. How has this affected the Korean Peninsula this year?
Well, with the Ukraine war, North Korea has been able to make strategic moves and strengthen military cooperation with Russia. In September, the North's leader Kim Jong-un even held a summit with Russia's Vladimir Putin, highlighting their strong cooperation. This sparked concerns of further arms deal between them, as it's widely believed that North Korea provided munitions to Russia and was given technology to successfully launch its first military satellite in return.
Russia and North Korea have been building close ties, especially through their rare summit this year. Russia was supported with weapons and North Korea has been able to gain military technology. This transaction is how the Ukraine war has greatly impacted the situation on the Korean Peninsula.
The expert also showed hopes of a possible shift in the war next year, such as a ceasefire agreement.
And speaking of ceasefire, Eunji, can we hope for the war to finally come to an end in the year to come?
Possibly, yes. Putin has reportedly signaled that he is open to a ceasefire in Ukraine, far short of his recent message saying Russia will not give up what's theirs. Citing two unnamed former senior Russian officials, the New York Times reported that Putin has been signaling through intermediaries since at least September that he is ready to make a deal. It also said Putin earlier indicated that he was satisfied with Russia's captured territory and is ready for an armistice. Well, there's still no evidence that Ukrainian leaders who have pledged to retake all their territory will accept this deal, but Putin's repeated interest in a ceasefire might put an end to the war that has lasted longer than expected. And it's important to see how the war ends, because if the war ends with Russia's occupation of Ukrainian territory, it will set an example of a country with nuclear weapons using its power to take over another country.
This makes a very great negative impact on the Korean Peninsula, because it is one of the cases the powerful, especially the nuclear weapon country, use their military power to invade the neighbor sovereign country, and this is exactly what North Korea has pursued for past several decades.
So both wars have definitely shown the dangers of how armed conflict can break into the region-wide combats.
That's right. We'll just have to hope that next year these wars don't expand to a larger regional conflict.
All right. Thanks for the wrap-up, Eunji.
Thank you.
The latest monthly data on Korea's population is doing little to ease concerns over the country's birth rates. Our Moon Hae-ryun has more on the numbers for October, which saw fewer than 20,000 babies.
South Korea saw its birth rate plummet while the number of deaths rose, leading to a natural population decline in October. Data released by Statistics Korea on Wednesday show that the total number of births recorded came to just under 19,000, a decrease of more than 8% compared to the same month last year. It's the first time that this figure has dipped below the 20,000 mark for any month of October since data was first compiled in 1981. The number of deaths was also the highest for any October, coming to over 30,000, which is a 3.4% rise on year. The country has seen a natural decline in the population since November 2019, and October of this year was no exception. Natural decline is calculated by subtracting the number of deaths from the number of births, meaning a figure for October of 11,889. This is the biggest drop in the natural population for any month of October ever recorded. Meanwhile, the number of marriages rose compared to both the month before and October 2022. The number of registered marriages came to just under 16,000, which is a 1% increase on year and more than 3,000 more than September this year. According to a Statistics Korea spokesperson, the reason for the rise is the fact that October has always been more popular than September for weddings. But July, August and September this year saw on-year declines unlike October. And the reason given for this was that the number of marriages saw a sharp rise in the second half of last year due to the easing of COVID-19 restrictions, meaning that the base value for last year was high.
That being said, October this year saw an increase, and more observation will be needed over the coming months to see whether the marriage market is seeing a recovery or whether this is simply an anomaly. Meanwhile, the number of divorces also saw an on-year rise of 6%. 문혜련, Arirang News.
Consumers this month believe prices will ease in the year ahead to 3.2%, which is the lowest in almost 2 years. Yoon with the details.
The Bank of Korea released results of its consumer sentiment survey on Wednesday, which shows consumer inflation expectations have dropped this month compared to the month before, amid a downward trend in consumer prices. In December, expected inflation for the year ahead was 3.2%. That's down 0.2 percentage points from the previous month, marking the lowest figure in 20 months since April last year. The central bank poll also showed the Composite Consumer Sentiment Index, or CCSI, reversed a 4-month downward streak that began in August. For December, the figure stood at 99.5, up 2.3 points from the previous month, still below the 100-point threshold, indicating that pessimists outnumber optimists. BOK officials say the improvement is due to a slowdown in rising interest rates amid hints that the cycle of U.S. Federal Reserve rate hikes has come to an end. The CCSI is used to gauge overall consumer sentiment, including for current living standards, prospective household income, and prospective spending, all of which are standardized. The central bank had expected inflation to reach a target rate of 2% by the end of this year, but now predicts inflationary pressure to continue into next year, with inflation expected to stay over 3% around the end of 2023. Yoon, Arirang News.
South Korea, beginning next year, is investing 1.5 trillion Korean won, or around $1.2 billion into ensuring the safety of workers at small-sized businesses prone to serious accidents. This is according to plans the ruling People Power Party and the government announced on Wednesday. Related ministries and organizations will help over 830,000 small businesses conduct self-inspections on safety. Further, South Korea will foster 20,000 new safety management experts by 2026. The government and the PPP are advocating for a 2-year delay in enforcing penalties on small-sized businesses that fail to comply with the Serious Accidents Punishment Act. This legislation was amended last year, but many small businesses still need to prepare to meet its requirement. The initial postponement of 2 years is set to expire in January. Starting next year, foreign national business leaders could be designated the so-called same person of conglomerates in Korea, meaning the chiefs of the companies following a role change. Park Gon-woo explains.
Starting from the first day of next year, Korea's Fair Trade Commission has announced that foreign nationals leading Korean conglomerates may be subject to regulation. These individuals, if designated as the same person, a term used for the chief or de facto leader of these conglomerates, will be held accountable under FTC rules. The same person is typically the chief executive of a conglomerate with total assets exceeding 5 trillion Korean won as determined by the FTC. The purpose of this designation is to closely monitor corporate behavior and enforce rules against anti-competitive practices. Furthermore, the FTC plans to implement stricter regulations for companies under the same chief, particularly in their business and financial dealings. The latest amendment introduces 4 exceptional criteria that allow the FTC to designate a corporate entity as the same person responsible for a business group, even if a different individual is officially in charge. These criteria include the actual controller of the business group does not have an investment in its affiliated company, and the official chief's relatives neither invest in nor hold executive positions in an affiliated company. If any of the 4 conditions is not fulfilled, the FTC has the authority to designate an individual, including foreign nationals, as the same person responsible for the company. This started getting controversial after Coupang, the largest e-commerce platform in Korea, was designated as a conglomerate by the FTC in 2021, and the Coupang corporate body was designated as same person instead of the Korean-American head, Kim Bum-seok. As he has U.S. citizenship, there were concerns that it is unfair under Korean law to other Korean persons because there were no precise regulations for those foreign nationals. But if the amendment gets implemented, it is expected that Kim will not be designated as the same person as he fulfills all of the 4 conditions. Park Gon-woo, Arirang News.
South Korean actor Lee Sun-kyun from the Oscar-winning movie Parasite has died at the age of 48. Lee was found unconscious in his car by police on Wednesday morning in central Seoul. According to reports, police had earlier been made aware of a note which was described as similar to a suicide note at the actor's home. He had been facing an investigation over drug allegations since October and was interrogated by authorities for a third time on Saturday. Lee rose to global fame following the release of the movie Parasite in 2019. Marking its 20th anniversary, K-pop group TVXQ released an album for the first time in 5 years. The duo Yoon and Max Changmin dropped their 9th full-length album 20 and 2 on Tuesday, the anniversary of their debut. The album features 10 songs, including the title track Rebel. The group will also hold a 2-day concert at the Inspire Arena over in Incheon this coming weekend. Originally a 5-member group, TVXQ became a duo in 2010 after the departure of 3 members amid a legal dispute over their contract with SM Entertainment.
The last week of this year has been much milder than the norm. There are no worries about the cold tomorrow either. The morning will start at -2 degrees in Seoul. It will rise to 6 degrees, very similar to today. The maximum temperatures will exceed the previous year's temperatures by 3 to 4 degrees nationwide. For the time being, the mild winter weather will continue. Even though the cold wave has moved away, it is difficult to do outdoor activities as the smoke from overseas flowed in and the atmosphere stagnated. Fine dust is accumulating in the west. The concentration of ultrafine dust in the Seoul metropolitan area in Chungcheongdo provinces and parts of the Jeollado provinces will be at bad levels. Wearing ultrafine dust mask is very important when going outside. Tomorrow, Seoul and Daejeon will start off at -2 degrees Celsius. As for the daily highs, Seoul and Chuncheon will get up to 6, Gwangju and Daegu 10 degrees Celsius. Between the weekend and the last day of this year, rain or snow is in the forecast throughout the country, removing fine dust away. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is News Center for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session coming up.
하나, 둘, 셋.
Hey, Mr. Cupid, look my way. Make sure you listen to what I say. I may be stupid or quite naive.
끝없이 쏟아지는 포토스팟. 휴대폰 한 대로 감당할 수 있겠니?
Arrow straight through my heart.
Welcome. (24시간) 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? Welcome. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 한국에 오면 먹어야죠. 먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
닭볶음탕. Even better than in the restaurants here in Korea.
Everyone, are you enjoying the end of the year? You're not sure how to spend the rest of 2023? No worries. Here at Idewi's Counseling Center, we'll take care of your worries. So go ahead, tell me what they are. You want to finish the year with something special, but you're not sure what? Then how about spending it with Simply Contour? It'll be the perfect finish to this year. Can you go watch it right now? Of course! Do you want to go watch Simply Contour with me? Then this week's Simply Contour, don't miss out!
Hello everyone, it's Wednesday and you're watching Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. As this is the last week of 2023, Within the Frame is wrapping up the year, sharing details of what happened under a different topic each day. Today we'd like to focus on North Korea. As North Korean leader Kim Jong-un pointed out, 2023 was a year of change as Pyongyang considers itself to have improved national power by successfully launching a spy satellite and solid-fuel ICBMs. It was also a year to remember as a clear alignment between North Korea and Russia was shown through the Vostocny summit between Kim and Putin. How are tensions on the peninsula forecast to develop next year, and what were other major issues related to North Korea? For this, we invite Dr. Go Myung-hyun, a senior fellow from the Asan Institute for Policy Studies. Dr. Go, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
And we also have Evans Revere, a non-resident senior fellow of the Brookings Institution. Mr. Revere was also the former acting assistant secretary of state. Good to have you with us again, Mr. Revere.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, first question to our Dr. Go. So, North Korea launched solid-fuel ICBMs 3 times this year. Though it is believed that flight capability has been demonstrated, the atmospheric re-entry technology is yet to be verified. Could you tell us more about ICBM's capabilities?
So clearly the North Koreans have yet to demonstrate that they have a re-entry capability. And but then the reason why North Korea hasn't been able to achieve the so-called the last phase of ICBM development could be because North Korea has obtained access to the key materials that could survive very extreme conditions that the range vehicles are subject to. So for instance, when the range vehicle on an ICBM falls back onto Earth, the temperature that this range vehicle is subject to can reach up to 3,800 degrees. So that's a temperature point where typical metal alloys can melt. So essentially, North Korea has to create or have access to materials that can survive such extreme conditions. And for instance, North Korea probably only required to have composite materials, for instance, carbon fiber. And these are materials that are subject to sanctions. So I think it could be because North Korea has now access to such a material that has been able to demonstrate the re-entry capability for which ICBMs. But even if North Korea obtains such materials and is able to perfect the technology, there's another hurdle yet. So if North Korea has to launch an ICBM across the Pacific Ocean towards the continental United States, it wouldn't suffice to have just one single warhead. North Korea would better, mathematically and economically speaking, would benefit from having multiple warheads in a single ICBM because a single ICBM can be targeted by the missile defense systems and so forth. So in order to ensure that at least one warhead reaches the continental United States, the single ICBM should carry multiple warheads. This technology is called multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicle, or MIRV. And then it's a very complicated and sophisticated technology. So even if North Korea achieves the re-entry technology, in order to essentially make their ICBM capability credible to the United States and South Korea and the international community, you will also have to achieve the MIRV technology. And it's unclear whether North Korea can achieve that technology anytime soon, even though the Kim Jong-un back in 2021 at the 8th Party Congress included MIRV as a part of the North Korea's weapons development roadmap. So it's possible that the series of tests that we have witnessed this year is in fact a part of North Korea's technological development roadmap that is testing re-entry technology as well as perhaps MIRV technology as well.
All right, so it is yet to fully achieve the ICBM capabilities it's expecting to do. All right. Now, Mr. Revere, ICBM was one thing, and another major achievement North Korea made was actually putting a military spy satellite into orbit after 2 failed attempts in May and August. During its key year-end meeting of the ruling Workers' Party, which has already started, Pyongyang is expected to decide on a further launch for next year. How did you see this year's satellite launch, and what's your forecast for such a launch next year?
Well, first of all, the North Koreans, in putting that satellite into orbit, did several things. Number one, it demonstrated yet again that it has the booster rocket capability to not only potentially deliver nuclear weapons over long distances, and that booster rocket technology was demonstrated yet again in this launch. It's very similar to the booster rockets that would be used in a nuclear attack. At the same time, the North Koreans not only demonstrated that, but they demonstrated that they've overcome a serious problem that they've been having, which is the stage separation, the ability of one stage of the missile to separate from the others, and then to have the engines engage in that second stage, and then another stage that would be necessary either to put an object into space or possibly deliver a single or multiple nuclear warhead. So they demonstrated now that they've overcome that problem that they've been having with stage separation. And just to underscore the point, if you're going to deliver nuclear weapons over long distances, you'd better make sure that you have that stage separation technology working perfectly. It's going to be essential. And they demonstrated that at least that aspect of this technology, if not mastered, has achieved a significant breakthrough. Perhaps with Russian help, but we don't know about that. The third thing, obviously, was the actual insertion into orbit of a reconnaissance satellite. And here, I'm skeptical, cautiously skeptical of what the North Koreans have actually accomplished. Having an operational reconnaissance satellite in orbit, taking pictures, transmitting those pictures back to Earth and having them analyzed, depends on having a very sophisticated level of technology in terms of the photography aspect of that mission. The right lenses, the right focus, et cetera, et cetera. That is really difficult technology to master. And it's not clear to me yet that what the North Koreans have been able to achieve is a level of technology that gives them anything more than what they could get by just commercially available satellite technology. The pictures that we've seen, or the alleged photographs that were taken, or descriptions of them, so far have not proved to me that the military utility of that reconnaissance satellite is what it needs to be if it's going to provide North Korea with the delicate, sensitive, focused information that it needs from a military reconnaissance satellite. So I think the jury is still out on whether the North Koreans have developed that aspect, that critical aspect of the technology that would really give them the insights, pardon the pun, into what's going on in the United States and Japan and the ROK in terms of on-the-ground developments there. So I think the jury is still out on that. But what we'll see, of course, I think in the coming months and the coming year are more satellite launches, more tests of the system, which will give the North Koreans an opportunity to move another step down the road. And we will see what they're able to develop in this very, very difficult area of satellite reconnaissance technology.
Right, we'll have to just wait and see what steps North Korea would make next year. Well, we have been talking about military provocations, and Dr. Gov't, in order to boost this leverage, many expect Pyongyang to further continue with provocations before Washington's presidential election takes place. That being said, how likely is a seventh nuclear test?
I think it's likely, much more likely than this year, obviously. And the reason is because there's a perfect timing for such a test taking place next year. You mentioned about the upcoming U.S. presidential elections, which increases the political uncertainty, and also the possible return of the former President Donald Trump to the White House, who had a very special relationship with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Also, it makes it likelier for North Korea to somehow be tempted to raise its leverage over the international community to impose its de facto nuclear power state. So having said that, though, I think there are more important nuances there, which is that the role of China in this case. I think North Korea is concerned about the fact that the Chinese are trying to somehow stabilize its relationship with the United States. And this is problematic for North Korea because North Korea's geopolitical strategy in the last couple of years has been about aligning itself with China and Russia and then cutting off all types of dialogue with the United States and South Korea. And the overall framework of such approach was called the so-called return of the new Cold War to East Asia. And this is something that the North Korea like to mention over and over because by portraying itself as part of a grander confrontation between China, Russia on one hand, and the United States, Japan, South Korea on the other, North Korea's illicit nuclear development program program is essentially portrayed as part of an ideological struggle between the authoritarian states and on the liberal democratic states on the other side. So therefore, you can minimize the impact and all the negative impact of such illicit behavior. But then if China and the United States somehow make amends, I mean, it's unlikely that China and the United States will make amends, but at least they try to manage the tension in the region. That means that the situation in the region will be stabilized, and that means that China and South Korea will also improve their bilateral relations. And this is something that North Korea doesn't want to see. It contravenes its own narrative about new Cold War. So it knows that the red line provocation, such as a nuclear test, can provoke not just the Americans, the South Koreans, and the Japanese, but also the Chinese. So, and then also it puts the Chinese in a very difficult position, force them to take actions against the protective ally, which is North Korea. This is what happened back in 2015 and 16, and in the outcome of such a tension, and then the conundrum that Chinese faced back then was the closer, tightening relationship between Beijing and Pyongyang, rather than Beijing helping Washington to somehow sanction North Korea. So I think North Korea is probably having that in mind in this case for the upcoming year, so which raises a chance of such a provocation taking place, which in this case will be a nuclear test.
All right, I see. Thank you for your explanation, Dr. Go. Now, Mr. Revere, when it comes to diplomatic achievement, we cannot leave out North Korea and Russia's bolstered military cooperation following the summit between leader Kim Jong-un and Russian President Vladimir Putin. But with China distancing itself from the two, some say the alignment between North Korea, Russia, and China will not last long. What is your view?
It's obvious that the Russia-North Korea connection, this new Russia-North Korea connection, has the potential to greatly strengthen North Korea's military capabilities, its satellite launch capabilities, satellite navigation capabilities, materials development, aircraft avionics. You could name a dozen areas of military, nuclear, and missile technology that the Russians could be helpful in. At the same time, North Korea's provision of artillery shells to Russia is helping the Russians keep up their outrageous invasion of Ukraine. At the same time, the Chinese, I think, when they see that relationship between North Korea and Russia, and they see their own role in working with Russia and North Korea, they do see an advantage deriving from trilateral cooperation among these three partners, particularly in that by having North Korea able to increase its military pressure on the ROK, on Japan, on the United States, by strengthening North Korea's overall military capabilities, this creates greater security cooperation, greater security threat against the United States, against Japan, and against the Republic of Korea. And that, I think, the Chinese, generally speaking, see to their own advantage. But that is not to say that the Chinese, as you suggested in the question, are completely happy with the developments that they're witnessing here. Number one, the war in Ukraine, the illegal invasion of the Ukraine has put China, which is a partner of the Russians, in a very difficult position of having to defend and explain an invasion that they feel obviously uncomfortable with. At the same time, North Korea's development of additional capabilities has the potential to lead to instability on China's border in Northeast Asia, and that instability undermines a key objective of the Chinese, and it also undermines, quite frankly, China's desire to be seen as trying to improve relations, as Dr. Go said, not only with the United States, but also with Japan and the ROK. So there's good news and bad news in this trilateral partnership for the Chinese, and that's why you see the Chinese holding it somewhat at arm's length. My sense is that the partnership will continue. We're not going to see this evolve into a full-blown military alliance with a whole series of detailed military exercises. But there is a tactical advantage that China sees by associating itself with these two countries, and that advantage derives from the fact that it makes the lives of American South Korean and Japanese strategists much more complicated, and that ultimately is to China's advantage.
All right, I see your point. Now, as our Mr. Revere already pointed out, Dr. Go, such an alignment, or should I say partnership, is going to continue. And against that, Seoul and Washington strengthened ties very much this year as they mark the 70th anniversary of their alliance. President Yoon and Biden even agreed on Washington Declaration. Could you tell us more about the details of this declaration and how significant was this?
No, I think it's also a very fundamental inflection point in the extended deterrence discussion that the South Korea and the United States have been having in the last decade or so in the backdrop of the increasing North Korean nuclear threat. So I think finally we switched the focus of the debate from one of deterrence to assurance. I think, we take the U.S. promise for extended deterrence for granted. We vaguely think that the United States will defend South Korea if South Korea is attacked with nuclear weapons, but then we don't really know how. And I think that was creating some concern in Seoul, that also not in Washington obviously, but in Seoul, that this lack of details in the extended deterrence commitment created doubts in certain parts of community, the experts in Seoul, that the United States might not defend South Korea if North Korea, especially if North Korea acquires capability such as an intercontinental ballistic missile that could target the mainland United States, which would really make a decision by the U.S. president to intervene in case of nuclear warfare in the Korean Peninsula. So I think finally in this year's summit through the Washington Declaration that the two allies have agreed that there will be a much more extensive discussion about extended deterrence, more details, more promise, more capacitation on the part of South Korea to understand and implement the extended deterrence, and also the case of a nuclear warfare scenario in case of contingency in the Korean Peninsula. I think that was essentially materialized in the form of the Nuclear Consultative Group. So even before Nuclear Consultative Group or NCG came into being, the two countries had a mechanism of discussion for extended deterrence called the Extended Deterrence Strategy and Consultation Group, EDSCG. But then when the United States and South Korea agreed to put the term nuclear to such a discussion mechanism, it essentially has telegraphing to not just to South Korea, but to the wider international community that the United States is very serious about the North Korea's nuclear threat, and it also implies that the United States is really going to employ all the means in order to defend South Korea, including nuclear weapons. So, in fact, the term NCG has echoes of the nuclear sharing, because NCG is very similar to nuclear planning group that the NATO countries have with the United States, and NPG is part of the nuclear sharing mechanism that the United States has in place with the European allies. So with NCG, we don't really have that level of nuclear sharing or nuclear cooperation with the United States. But then I think as a placeholder, it's essentially the imagination is the limit. I think with NCG in place, we'll be filling that discussion group with more details and more actions as North Korea advances in nuclear threat. And I think we are already seeing this taking place, such as the TTX, or tabletop exercises, which is essentially a simulation of case North Korea uses nuclear weapons, and as well as integrating nuclear use scenario into operational plans that involve South Korea and the U.S. forces in the Korean Peninsula. And I think these are step-by-step will increase South Korea's so-called nuclear intelligence, and that's what the Deputy National Security Advisor Kim Tae-yeol mentioned after the second session of the NCG meeting took place last month. So with these steps, I think it makes not just the American commitment to extended deterrence more credible to the South Korean eyes, but also makes deterrence against North Korea stronger. Because now the U.S. promise of defending South Korea, including with nuclear weapons, is much more credible, and that assures the South Korean allies the deterrence itself becomes stronger, and really puts the North Koreans into a dilemma. They have developed so many nuclear weapons, but if South Korea is not doesn't fear North Korea's nuclear capability, so what's the point of developing nuclear weapons? I think we are entering the first phase of North Korea seriously considering negotiating their nuclear capability, because if they find out that nuclear capability is it really doesn't really matter, doesn't have an impact, then I think North Korea will finally think about negotiating this aspect of their nuclear capability.
All right, I see your point, Dr. Go. Now, Mr. Revere, not just Seoul-Washington ties, the thaw in Seoul-Tokyo relations helped fuel momentum for three-way cooperation involving Washington as well. And the leaders of the three countries held the landmark Camp David summit in August. Could you tell us how meaningful this was?
In my view, this was one of the most significant diplomatic and strategic events that I've witnessed in Northeast Asia in many, many decades. This is something that American strategic thinkers, American political leaders, American diplomats have called for years, was a more intense, greater, full-blown cooperation among the United States and its two key East and Northeast Asian security partners. And to see how the ROK and Japan have been able to push past the many difficulties, historical and otherwise difficulties that they have between them, and to sit down and start talking about the shared interests that the two countries have, the shared threats that the two countries face, and the shared goals and values that they do have, and then to build on that and then work together with the United States and to build this partnership that is still emerging. It's got a long way to go, but it's really come a long way already. This is one of the most significant things that I, as somebody who's worked for many decades on U.S.-Korea relations, but also many decades on U.S.-Japan relations, this is something that has impressed me deeply, and I think it's one of the most pivotal security events that we have seen and diplomatic events that we have seen in many, many decades. It has tremendous potential in the future, and at the same time, it is sending an extremely important signal, not only to North Korea, but to China and Russia and to others who would seek to engage in mischief in East and Northeast Asia. But once again, this is a historical development of significant proportion, and it's something that I think needs to be treasured. And as America and the Republic of Korea look at their own politics and look at future elections, one of the most important things that I hope the two countries will do will be to preserve and grow this regardless of the outcomes of their respective political processes.
All right, I see your point, Mr. Revere. Now, I'd like to ask many more questions to our experts, but unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today's edition. Thank you, Mr. Revere, for your time and insights.
Thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Go, for your time and insights as well. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right, that's all for Within the Frame tonight. We'll be back tomorrow with more in-depth stories. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.